now. Okay. So the goal for the clinical and system transformation project is to improve safety, quality, and consistency of patient care throughout VCH, PHSA, and PHC. And we're trying to configure for enterprise design, which means that the design elements are standardized and similar across all sites. We aim for a connected health system that works for patients and the people who care for them. Our project drivers include the following: patient safety first, best way every day, FaceTime, not chase time, and draw on data. So the purpose of this session is to provide the subject matter experts the opportunity to review enterprise workflow applicable to the anesthesia out of OR, and then anesthesia assistants. And it's also to identify new design requirements and address gaps to satisfy workflow. And I will hand it over to Tammy.
Thank you, Tommy. So I'm going to go over the workflow, starting from the prior of the day surgery. Starting with the booking clerk at the Richmond hospitals, they will receive the booking packages from the physician's office via the working queue monitor. The booking clerk will then associate the booking packages to the patient's chart. This will create the pre-admit encounter and waitlist the patients. For elective surgery, the booking clerk will schedule the appointment once the date is known. If it's for out of OR procedures, it will be booked via surgery anise out of OR non-surgical appointment type.
Okay.
And continuing on for the prior of the day surgery, for anesthesia assistants, we're just wondering, this will be part of their clinical gatherings questions. If anesthesia assistants will have any participations in the PAC workflow, and for anesthesiologists, then they will complete the PAC workflow as per their unit or practice.
Currently, the anesthesiology assistants at Richmond Hospital do not participate in the PAC.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to the day of surgery, starting with the SDC, the surgical daycare clerk. They will admit the patient when the patient arrives, prepare the chartlet, which is the mini version of the paper charts, consisting of the demographic face sheets, patient ID labels, and the wristbands. For anesthesia assistant, if it's applicable, then they can review the patient's chart, review any lab results, allergy status, if there's any line insertions, IV insertions to be performed, and document those tasks in the interactive view. I'll talk more about that in my demonstration. For anesthesiologists for the day, they can also review the patient's chart, complete the anesthesia consult notes, and place any anise pre-op orders via the anise pre-op power plan. For the intra procedures, keep in mind this will be for the out of OR or also for elective surgery. For anesthesia assistants, continuing on with the task of reviewing the patient's chart, also performing any line insertions, intubations, if there's a need for administering fluids, blood products, also help with associating monitors, anesthesia devices in the SA anesthesia. So SA anesthesia is another application via power chart to document the anesthesia records. Documenting actions, medications, and personnels also via SA anesthesia in the anesthesia records. When the case is complete, they'll finalize the records via SA and document in the iView, which is the equivalent of the flow sheets for other tasks such as IVs, cell savers data, etc. For anesthesiologists, documentation is also done via anesthesia records in SA anesthesia. Finalize the anesthesia records when the case is complete, and also place any post-operative orders in planned states. Post-procedures, anesthesia workload and anesthesia assistance will be as follow. If there is ventilator maintenance, if it's applicable for Richmond site, and also documentations in the IVU. For anesthesiologists, transferring the patients to the PACU space, verbal handoff to the PACU nurse, updating any post-op orders if it's applicable, and complete any post-op documentation if it's still required. Any questions so far? This is just a very broad overview of the workflow, starting from prior to day of the procedures to post procedures. All right, so these are the note templates available on CST Cerner. So we have anesthesia records, admission notes. So these are all note template. Most of them will require co-signatures if it's done by the AA. So here we have ones just for anesthesia assistance narrative note that does not require a co-signature. All right, moving on. If there's no more questions, I'll do a demonstration via bar chart. Start sharing my screen. Yeah.
Tammy, should we let Caitlin do the
Oh, yes,
scheduling
please.
portion
Yes.
first?
Sorry.
Let me
Thanks.
just give you co-host Caitlin.
Thanks for reminding.
Yep, we should be good to go.
Okay. Everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So as Tammy was mentioning, I'll walk through receiving the booking package in WorkQM. There's the encounter creation and then actually scheduling the out of OR appointment. So this application I have open is the WorkQ monitor where you're receiving fax booking packages. Here for VGH as our example, they don't have a separate queue for out of OR. They just have like an all other services, and this is where they have their out of OR come in, but that's dependent on site. If you wanted a separate fax number for out of OR, you could do that, or you could just have them come in the same place as your main OR surgeries. So I'll find my booking package. I'll double click, and then this is, I know that this is where I will associate the patient so that their booking packages then can be found on their chart. And there they are. So I've already made an encounter, but you could potentially not have the encounter. And then if you needed to make their pre-day surgery encounter, you would go to PM office and you could do it through the surgery waitlist. This is the same workflow that you would have seen in our elective scheduling. So I won't go through that again, but that's how you would make the encounter. I've already created it, so I'll just click OK. And now that booking package is associated to that patient. And I'll label it as a document type of a surgery booking package. I'll say the status is complete. And then through that, when I click OK, it now drops off my queue and it's associated to that patient's chart. So I can leave the fax. So all of that should have been it's very similar to almost exactly the same as elective surgeries. The part that's different for out of OR scheduling. So here we have our scheduling appointment book. I have VGH as the example, and the location is VGH out of OR. So your location will be RHS out of OR. And you can see we have all these different slots. So for example, VGH, they have a lot. You can schedule out of ORs into their ER, ICU, IR area, their PACU, into the ward, stay bed, and then some cardiology units. So this is dependent on your site. So if you only have a couple areas that out of ORs can take place, for example, a PACU or the ER, then we'll just build what you need. You don't need all of these. So for our demo purpose, we'll show you scheduling a cardioversion into the PACU. So you'll go to the appointment, I'll find my patient. Encounter that I created. And now my location is going to be VGH out of OR. And then my appointment type, this is where it's different from an elective surgery. Instead of an appointment type that's surgery, you would use surgery, anesthesia out of OR, non-surgical. And so when you click that specific appointment type, it then filters out the fields, the rest of the fields that you need to fill out. So in an elective surgery, you would have a number of fields, whereas an anesthesia out of OR appointment type, there's only a couple mandatory fields. It got rid of my patients, so I'm going to find them again. Okay. Now I'll put the provider. So if this is an anesthesia doing sedation in PACU, then you could use them as the primary. If you need to book a surgeon, you can put the anesthesiologist here and then book the surgeon. And then if out of OR patients do need a PAC, it will automatically say no, they don't. But if they do need a PAC, you just change this to defer to PAC screening. And then when you book them, this out of OR patient they'll show up on the PAC request queue. So it's whatever your site needs. And then you can also put public scheduling comments. So once those fields are completed, I'll click move. This is the appointment attributes window. So this is where you select the procedure that you'd like to book. So I'm booking a cardioversion, so I'll search for that. And then this will pop up all the available procedures to book. This is filtered based on the location. So if your main OR has about 200 procedures, you would see all those 200 procedures. But if you're out of OR, you only have 10 or less, then only those 10 would show up. So you don't have a huge list. I'll double click. And then this will show the times that I can complete for setup, cleanup, the duration of the procedure. Click OK. And then this shows up in our work in progress window. So you can see it says out of OR. Here, if your out of OR patients do need to be waitlisted, you can click request and put them on the wait list. But if that's not something that your site does, then you can just directly schedule them. So I'll schedule this patient into the PACU location for 10 o'clock. These red books show that there's no conflict. So the room's available, the patient's available, and the provider's available. And then I can click confirm. This confirm window pops up, just making sure everything is correct. You click OK. And now my appointment shows in this like teal color, and that means it's confirmed and scheduled. Any questions about this scheduling part?
Why is there a red? You mentioned that there's the red thing suggests that there's no time conflicts or personnel conflicts. So why does one box have a red and the other one doesn't? Because there is a time conflict with the second one?
Yeah, so if I were to drag those back and one of the books would show white and open, it could be that the patient is booked for an appointment somewhere else. Or if I'm trying to book them at this exact time, where this other patient is, then it would say the room's unavailable or the slot is. Or if the provider book, it's just showing that that provider is booked somewhere else. So it's showing conflicts all across the hospital in the system.
And those individual conflicts are traceable then outside of your particular area.
Yes. You can override it, but it will show you, if you click that white open book where the conflict is, it will show you where the conflict is in the system. Any other questions? Okay, I'll pass it back to Tammy.
Thank you, Caitlin. All right, I'll share my screen. So can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So this is the bar chart that I just opened, and this is the perioperative tracking page or shell. There's a lot of information here for today's demos. I won't go over everything, but I'll just go over some of the key points on this page. So here we can select or look up patients via their MRN. This is a recent list, so in case you want to go back quickly to your recently looked up patients, you don't have to go through the entire process to search for the patients. Here to load your location tabs on the perioperative tracking shell, you can go to the list, add or remove list, and then here you can see all the live sites and all their individual units. So for today's demo, we're going to go to use the VGH surgery tracking group, and then we're going to use our VGH provider tab. Once I click this tab, I'm going to click this tab to load the patient list. This is essentially the census or slates or the patient list for that unit. Here we can see there's a filter here that is to look ahead or look before. So we can select VGH anesthesia for today. This is our patient here for demo. This bar here represents the patient's chart. I'll show you how to open it up in a little bit, but basically for this bar here, you can see all the pertinent information about the patients, age, sex, surgeons, anesthesiologists, the procedures they're booked for, status. This can also be a communication tool, so that it'll be like a one place to locate any notes. Some more buttons here. This is the refresh buttons for our chart. So we want to click here as much as or as frequently as possible as you're updating the chart, because other clinicians will be accessing the charts at the same time. So in case they're putting in their own data as well. All right, so moving on, now we're going to open the chart. So for my demo, I'll be going through the general workflow for anesthesia assistants. There will be some overlap with anesthesiologists. So Tommy will go over any extra steps pertaining to the anesthesiologist workflow. So to open the patient's chart, we have the blue arrow here. I'm going to double click into the blue arrow, and we have the assign a relationship window pops up. I am demoing as an anesthesia assistant, so I'm going to click on that. This relationship assignment lasts for 13 hours. Okay. All right, so now we are in the anesthesia workflow. And again, you can see all the key information. Basically, this opens up to the patient's chart. Here, this blue bar here, we call them the banner bar. We have the patient's name up here. We want to make sure we're opening to the right patient's chart, all the demographic data, the encounter number, making sure we're in the right encounter. the locations, encounter type, and the attending physicians. This is the allergy status for the patients. As an AA, we'll want to review the allergy status. So we can click into here. So here we have the patients, the test patients having an allergy to penicillin. And scroll down here. For all these ones, we can also expand to see the additional comments. And once we've confirmed with the patients, we can mark as review. Okay. All right, so here we have the menu here. So the menu will lead you to different sections of the patient's chart. So I'm gonna also go over the interactive view that I mentioned earlier. That's for that's the equivalence of flow sheets to document patients' assessments like vital signs, peripheral IV insertions. There's also a sections for cell savers. So once you open it up, there are different bands. So we're gonna go to blood product administrations. There are many categories. Once we open it up, it opens up more flow sheets. So for documentations for peripheral IVs, we can go to here. You see this little icon, that's called a dynamic group. So if we want to document that we've inserted peripheral IVs in the patients, we can click onto the icon and it will show you another pop-up windows, dynamic groups, meaning that it's got a clusters of data pertaining to one specific activity. So we can document that we have inserted a short IV in the patients. We have it on the forearm. It's on the left side. And it's a 20 gauge needle. Okay. And we'll show it on the on here on the cell. So there are other lines that we can document on this under this band. So central line, arterial line, vital signs. If AA is helping out with transfusion using cell saver products, this is where we can document as well. All right. Any questions so far? This is a very high-level overview of workflow pertaining to AA. Well, then Tommy will be demoing on the anesthesia providers.
Thank you, Tammy. Going to share my screen again. Okay, can everybody see my tracking board?
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so as Tammy said before, we have different tabs here for out of OR. Patients, it'll say RHS out of OR in the live environment, and for any elective surgeries, the anesthesia provider will use the RHS provider tab. So we're just going to use the same patient, make sure it's the correct one. So double click, and this time we're going to go in as an anesthesiologist. So this is what the provider page looks like. So you have the same gray toolbar up top, same banner bar with the patient demographics. And under the provider view, you have all these different workflow tabs, anesthesiologist workflow, quick orders, things like that. And under the anesthesiologist workflow tab, there are different workflow components that we can use for documentation. So for example, for history, there are different types of history that we can document. If the patient has gone to a certain site before, there will be information available here. So basically, the more the providers contribute to this page, the better the chart is going to be. Allergies is available, which Tammy showed before. You can click into it to change an allergy as necessary, and then you can go back here. And then medication, you can do your medication reconciliations. You can click into that. And then you can import your medication from it, but you will require Prime registration for that. And in any time, you can always click on the home house icon. It'll bring you back to your provider page. So I'm just going to document something so we can get pulled into the anesthesia consult node. Just going to do. And usually the anesthesia console quick chart is documented in PAC, I believe. Okay, and when I'm done, I'm just going to sign for that one. And then the font will change from purple to black. Means you've already signed it. So now we want to go down here and then click onto the anesthesia consult hyperlink, and then you'll bring up a console note. Okay. So there are several ways to document and console note. The first way is the dynamic documentation, which will pull in information from the workflow components, as you can see here. And if there are components that you do not want to include in your documentation, you can always exit out. And the second way to document is to use the auto tags. We have some default auto tags, and you can also add your own personal ones, and we will help you with that during the provider session. And another way to document is to use the faster dictation service. And finally, you can always do manual entry. So let's say we've completed our note. We're going to go ahead and sign. And you can change the title. You can CC to any provider you like. And when you're done, you can just click sign. And the note will appear in your documentation. If you've done a note in PAC, it will also appear here. Okay, so next is our power plan. So power plans are like pre-printed orders. So what we want to do is to go back to our provider view, and then now we want to click on the quick orders. So most of the anesthesia power plans are available here. So you have the PAC power plans, you have the pre-op ones, the PACU for inpatient, PACU for outpatient, and then you also have the surgical daycare power plans available. So to order the power plan, you just click on it, and then you'll see this shopping cart. You just click into the shopping cart, and then you can modify. Okay, so now you can select the appropriate orders. If the orders are not available here, you can always add to phase. And you can also create your favorite orders, power plans as well. And once you're done, you can just click plan for later, and then you sign for it. And then it will get initiated accordingly by the nursing staff. Any question there? Okay, so
do all power plans, if I make a unique power plan, does it have to be approved by higher levels? Is there like quite a process to get this, or can I just throw in my own power plan in?
You can kind of save a favorite power plan, but you kind of have to start with one of these and then just add the appropriate orders to it. But there is a way to create a completely separate power plan. It is a process, but it's doable.
So does it require higher levels of approval? Because otherwise, what prevents everybody from just coming up with, 10,000 different power plans?
Yeah, it will require approval from other anesthesiologists from other sites as well.
Yeah, the order sets team has quite a rigorous method that you have to go through in order to get a power plan created and validated. And then it goes through many channels to make sure that it's all appropriate content before it comes into the live domain.
Typically, what we see is using one of the power plans that's already established, like as Tommy has that preoperative day of surgery. You could use that kind of as a skeleton and then add orders and save it as a favorite at the user level. And so typically we see anesthesiologists do that and save it as a favorite, as opposed to creating like a net new power plan from scratch.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Sami to go over the surgeon anesthesia application.
Thanks, Tommy. So I'll go ahead and share. And are you able to see my screen?
Perfect.
Fantastic. Okay. So this is the surgeon and anesthesia module. This will be your intraoperative module to capture whatever documentation pieces, medication pieces that you need to do intraoperatively on your patients. This is going to be a little bit different than power chart, but it functions similar. Essentially, first, we want to find our patient. We don't have the tracking board here. However, we do have a search criteria, which we can fill out with your surgical area. You could always switch your surgical area as needed, depending on where you go perform the procedures. Right now, our cases are scheduled VGH-OR, so I already are out of OR. So I selected that. I can change my date range as needed. I'll just leave it today. You hit search, and you're able to see the two scheduled cases. The one Tommy had scheduled for this demo, and then the one Caitlin showed during her demo as well. So in order to populate pieces on this, in order to access the documentation for a patient, we just need to have them scheduled. We also have a process to deal with like those urgent traumas if they weren't scheduled at the time, but you still need to access it. So we also have that as well. For the sake of this demo and kind of a high-level overview, we're just going to go ahead and grab our patient here. We'll just validate its correct FIN number and correct name. Double click on it. It's going to populate this verify case window. Essentially, this is just like kind of your just a reminder, just make sure that the patient that you're working on is the patient's chart that you're opening. So we're going to go ahead and hit this green verify case to launch. And it's launched my other screen, but I'll bring it over. So first, what it will display is, and this is once again, this is our non-prod domain, so it'll look a little different, but this is a select device window. So essentially, it allows you to, depending on where you are at the hospital and what room you're operating in, it allows you to associate your device. So that way, like when we go through the procedure, your vital signs and other pieces that the devices are capturing will flow in. So right now I'm going to hit cancel. I'm not going to select device. This is right now just a dummy device we have in our non-live domain. Okay. And everything populates on my other screen, which is kind of annoying, but I'll bring it over. But essentially a continuing orders window will open up. It'll be one of the first pieces that opens up. And in this right now, you see it's blank, but if your patient, let's say preoperatively had a line drawn or they're coming with some fluids, you have the ability to bring that fluid into your intraoperative phase so that you can address it like if you needed to address it during the procedure. So I'm going to hit cancel. And finally, I'm going to get, so this here is our intraoperative anesthesia module. As you can see here, we still have this similar banner bar. patient's name with a case number. It's going to be very similar to how you saw it in Power Chart. You have the patient's name all in the middle here. This blue line is going to move as I speak. It's just the current time, so don't be too alarmed with that. And I also I log in as the anesthesiologist. So my time, I went ahead and started my time right here at 9 o'clock. So one of the first things that we do, because as this is has quite a few different ways to, I guess, complete, is that we want to launch macros for our case. And essentially what macros are, and what we will do as we get closer to go live, is we take your documentable pieces, whether it's like monitors or actions, medications, and we list them all out and summarize them into essentially a giant list. That way it makes it easier for the providers as they go through and try to document a case. So I'm going to go up here to the top where it says macros, click on the macro button. And in here, we have different categories with our different macros as needed. So once again, for these, we do have the ability to customize these to each site. So right now we're in just VGH and my non-product environment. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one macro. I'm just going to select this one just to show essentially what's in it. So as you can see here, we have our actions, medications, and some monitors we want to go ahead and start. So I'll click on it and I'm going to go ahead and click execute. Our page here is going to truncate just a bit because now it shows us that we have some medications available for us to document against. Obviously some gases, monitors. Right now I didn't establish my demo mode, so we're not going to see any vitals populate in here. I'm going to go ahead and click on this little clipboard to-do list. So essentially when our macro launched, we set it to have a few pieces execute, meaning we want medications going straight to the chart. And then we also have a couple other pieces that we leave on the to-do list. So as the case progresses, we can address them as needed. So if we wanted to go ahead and document a medication, we have the ability, we'll say we wanted to put in this propofol, and we're going to say we start at 9:05. I'll go ahead and click on it and drop it in here. So the first thing to note is this is our medication administration window. And we have a couple different ways to document this medication. We can insert it as a bolus. We can do it as an infusion. One thing to note, it says weight required. And so in terms of your future state, chances are someone else is probably going to have seen the patient before you have. So if a nurse or whomever has seen the patient, most likely they're going to be documenting that weight. And so that weight will then cross over into this patient's chart. For this demo, we hadn't done that, so that's fine. I'm just going to go ahead and insert a weight for this patient by clicking on them, just so I can demonstrate. This this medication. And I apologize, I'm not the most clinical person, so if I give a really odd dose, please forgive me for that. But in here, we can see we have dose, amount, volume, weight-based dose, whatever you may need. And so we'll go ahead and plug in an amount. Based on what I plug in, it will just auto-calculate, and I can go ahead and press OK. I can specify the site, the route, update the admin time as needed. I'll go and press OK. And we'll just drop it on there at this 9:05, and we can see it populate here. And a couple other pieces we have within this documentation piece is we have our actions, which if I go ahead and double click on this, it's going to take it from my to-do list, brings it down to the chart. It brings it actually to the to-do list, at the current time. And so I can actually double click on that action itself. And within here, we've created action details. So these are and pieces that you can document against as the case is going. Essentially, these are right now. I don't believe we have anything required on these actions, so you have the ability to just select whichever one is most pertinent. Once this finalizes, the only thing that will display is what you have selected. You also have a free text option to document as needed, and then you can go ahead and press OK to document your action here. If we want to document like let's say a intake, an output, or an action, and it's not on our macro, meaning it's not displayed whether we have it executed or within our to-do list, we have the ability to actually, there's quite a few different ways to do it, and it's one of those pieces with this module. You can document in multiple different ways, and they're all accurate. When this gets adopted, usually anesthesiologists find after the first couple of days the most preferred one. I typically go up to the top here, and so let's say I wanted to document a line item. I'm going to go ahead and click this intake, and this will allow us to add. It'll allow us to add in a item that we're looking for. So usually this is pretty intuitive. Essentially, so I wanted to add an intake. I can go ahead and search for what we have. I'll go ahead and click on it. And let's say I just want to start this bag. And of course, it's on my other screen. So I could go ahead and place it on here. We'll say this patient came in with this quite a bit earlier. So we'll say 8:45. I'm going to just go ahead and let this run. Let's make it a little bit more. Okay. We'll start back. So we're just going to let it run. Essentially, I didn't give it a volume. When we get to the end of the case, I'll just go ahead and put a volume in there and then kind of cap it. Another piece to notate is that we'll be able to walk through our to-do list. If we have to document any of these other medications, we can. We have quite a few pieces in here. And if there's anything that's any action that you do need to document, we once again don't see it here. We have everything listed out within our actions page. So if I go to category, and you can see here how we've utilized and categorized these pieces. So that's another piece for our macros. Why essentially we don't want you to start off blank. We want you to have those summaries kind of built out, and then we can launch those. And the idea is that if you do need to go ahead and, I don't know, if you wanted to document one of these pieces, you can document as needed, as opposed to always going and searching for it. Any questions so far on the module itself?
And then can most of this be done and added on retrospectively?
Yes. So as you say here, like I have the ability, like whether it's my medication or my any of my actions, I have the ability to not only document them in current time, but also to backdate them to when the procedure occurred. So in the event if there's certain medical reasons like can't put all the focus on the screen, obviously go ahead and take care of your patient, and then once this is completed, once that's taken care of, you can go ahead and complete this piece. Okay. Couple other things. I know we're a little limited on time, but one thing to take note is, especially you'll get training on this piece, and whenever I've seen other anesthesiologists, usually when they get the training on here, they kind of get the gist of this module. It's rather one of our more intuitive modules. So we have the ability to put an ASA class. If I hit this plus sign, I can go ahead and select our ASA class as needed. We're going to press OK, and then our anesthesia type as well. We can also see what's currently documented in surgery. So if right now we're in an out of OR document, but if we were in a, let's say you were in the main OR and you had nursing documentation available as well, you'll have certain pieces cross through like our anesthesia start and stop time, we had cross through, and it'll cross over to the nursing record as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click general, or we'll click procedural sedation here, keep it succinct. And if there is like a discrepancy, not only does the anesthesiologist have that time, so let's say you change your surgery procedure start time, and the nursing has a separate one, you'll get a notification as well as nursing when they try to finalize their chart. I'm gonna go and press OK. Got these up. Excuse me. And so we can see here when I launched my macro, this macro had everything, all the actions go at the same time. So as we can see here, an anesthesia start, let's say we wanted our anesthesia start to be a little bit earlier. I can click and drag it over. This one I probably shouldn't have, because it's going to just take a little bit to respond. So we'll give it a second. And then we have our anesthesia stop, which I'll select and move as well. I think it's based on my internet connection here. So ideally the delay shouldn't be as large as the one you're seeing here. It really doesn't want to, really didn't like when I did that. Okay, so I moved it over. As we can see here, we'll say our anesthesia started earlier, and then our anesthesia stopped. So instead of me dragging it this time, I'll just go ahead and manually change it. I'll say we'll finish it there. So we can go ahead and move it as needed. Then a couple other things to note in here is that, let's say the patient ends up, or let's say the procedure is over and we're moving the patient to the recovery area. We don't have to finalize this case right at that time. Chances are there's still other documentation pieces that you perhaps you hadn't touched throughout the case that you need to go back and chart, but that's fine. You could always suspend your case. Essentially what suspending does is just stops any lines running, any monitors displaying in that regards, and it allows us to take the patient. You can take the patient back to the PACU area as needed, and then you don't have to finalize this case here in the intraoperative area. You can finalize it wherever essentially you have a computer, because once it's suspended, you can just go back and relaunch it. We have the PACU handoff action as well. And so if I click on this, this is essentially, you could document the report you gave to the nurse, anything else that's pertinent. We can always free text and click as necessary. Now, if I want to, and once again, for the sake of this demo, if I want to go ahead and finalize my case here, I have the ability to do it. There's a couple things I need to do. One, I need to make sure my anesthesia, let's say I had this line started earlier, I need to have my provider time to overlap my medications. So I can go back to personnel here on top. And you can always use this personnel to enter, like if, let's say if the anesthesiologist assistant's running this, they can have this open and they can put in the anesthesiologist provider as well. So you can always add, for this sake, just for the demo, I'm just going to go ahead and say I started my time at 8 o'clock. So I'll go ahead and put that there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say we finished our bag. We'll go ahead and give the entire bag and volume there. So I went ahead and just put in my volume and I closed it. I'm going to remove the meds that we didn't use, so I can always right-click remove, right-click remove. I can look at this one, make sure it's okay. If I needed to add another medication, I can always, on the same line, click in the area. It gives me a new instance of it. If I needed to infuse, I could. I'll go ahead and remove my items from my demo. Let's see here. Excuse me, I'll remove my items from my to-do list just so we can clear this out. And then I'll go ahead and click my finalize case option. So this will go ahead and tell me when my start and stop time is. I'll I'll go ahead and update that stop time here just so we can see some error. We get the finalized, we get the deficiencies window. So it's going to tell us exactly what, it's going to tell us what's missing on this record. In this case, right now, just saying the signature, that's going to be the provider of record, and your electronic signature is just going to be, where did it's over. It's just going to be our, just our login information. So we sign off on it, and then we can go ahead and finalize. And this is going to just take a bit, but then it'll go ahead and finalize onto our, it'll finalize and it'll write over to our patient's chart. I know I went very quick on that just based on time, but any questions on that piece? Once again, note that you will have plenty of opportunity to not only train with that module, but also update the macros as needed. Excuse me, but if there's no questions, I'll hand it back over to Tommy.
Thank you so much, Sami. Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen again. Okay, so next one is about the PCI epidural nerve block. We understand there's no APS or POP service at Richmond, but all the pain power plans are available to order for both elective surgery in the out of OR spaces. There are some example power plans here. Just to note that for lidocaine and ketamine infusion, the additional transfer pain management power plans are required for coverage until the surgeons can place their own pain orders.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. So this one here, although there's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of information all over this slide. I think what we're trying to emphasize is that there are varying power plans. We know that you do out of OR, for example, when you go into the labor and delivery unit and the anesthesia on call will start an epidural, perhaps you'll start a PCA. So we have power plans that already exist for you that are in the system that you'll be able to start and initiate for them. And since there isn't an APS formal team that you have, one of the questions I had was, is it the anesthesia on call, or does the entire anesthesia group place power plans for opioid tolerant patients? Like, for example, if you need to increase to a lido infusion or a ketamine infusion, is it just the anesthesiologist who's looking after the patient that will place that power plan, or is there other anesthesiologists that will come in? Like, do you call maybe a colleague to help start those for you?
Currently, whoever's patient it is on the ward, they'll deal with it during the daytime. And after hours, it'll go to the on-call person.
Okay, yeah, so you work together as a colleague.
It could be a variety of different people.
Oh, fair. Yeah. So we do have these anesthesia lidocaine infusion power plans. There is a certain level of ones. So because some places like VGH, for example, that has this anesthesia POPs team, these power plans, while you don't have that team, are still available for you on your site. And basically what we wanted to emphasize here, what Tommy was saying, is that as you're transferring someone off of one of these more opioid tolerant power plans, we want to make sure that there's no lag time. So if anesthesia is now removing their increased pain medications and they want to taper a patient off, we have these ones called the anesthesia surge transfer pain management power plans that will allow for the anesthesiologist to place certain medications for a certain duration of time. It's a couple of days. And then that allows the surgeon then to recognize that, and they now have to take over for pain management afterwards. So that's what this slide is emphasizing. So we recognize that you can utilize these during an out of OR. It could be elective patients, it could be emergency patients, but there's all sorts of power plans that exist in the system for you to continue with your workflow.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. If there's no more question about this page, I'm just going to move on to the next one. Okay, we only have half an hour, about 40 minutes, but we might not have time for a break. Is it okay if I just continue on?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go over some questions that we have for the site. For the out of OR procedures, other than cardioversion and ECT, do you do any other procedures?
Procedures lists for us that I just quickly wrote down. So yes, ECT, yes, cardioversion, yes. Epidural blood patches, pain consultations, and nerve blocks.
Okay. Okay.
And those last two would probably be in the recovery room currently, is the way it's set up.
Okay. Thank you. Next page. Okay. And in terms of the workflow for the anesthesia team, are they pretty similar to what we showed you, or are they drastically different?
Generally, I think they're close to that.
Okay.
There may be some differences with some of the nerve blocks and pain stuff, but I'll let Sheila in the recovery room comment on that process.
So the procedure for the patches and pain management really reflects the way we manage community patients, in that we ask that the physician who is involved in giving doing the procedure has to book the patient on the emergency list, and then the patient is brought down at a time that works for the flow of the recovery room. The patient is given a bay and a nurse assigned to that bay, so that the physician can have that nurse be dedicated to care of the patient after the procedure.
Okay. Thank you.
So
And,
it's quite a dynamic process. So this idea of scheduling patients in for a certain given period of time is not the way our workflow works for those things. It's you fit it in when you can. So you can schedule it for 10 o'clock in the morning, but there's an equal chance that could happen anywhere between 11 in the morning and 11 at night, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that is correct. It has to do with what's happening on the slate and where we can fit that person in.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'll jump in for that. Generally for our out of OR scheduling, they're kind of considered virtual instead of like, here's the OR scheduled for this specific time. It's mostly we use out of OR scheduling so that anesthesia can have their sedation record. So it doesn't have to be exact if you just want to get them on the board, and then that allows you to access that patient anytime during the day. That's kind of how we view out of OR.
Oh, that works.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, we're moving on to our second question. Do you assist in any kind of IR procedure?
No.
Okay. And is there a anesthesiology hazardous drug workflow at Richmond?
I don't understand that statement.
I think it's talking about
like for chemotherapy drugs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we have a hazardous drug workflow, but it's not anesthesiology specific.
Okay,
We have guidelines around handling patients that are receiving cytotoxic drugs. And that has to do with PPE and disposal of linen and that sort of thing. Is that what you're
Okay.
referring to?
okay, but it's not anesthesiology specific, like what Dr. Draper was saying.
No.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I think we're looking for, like, are they initiated in the pre-op? Who gets the medication ready for you? Does anesthesia give the medication, for example? Is it a nurse that will give the medication? Things like that we're looking for. Is it the anesthesiologist who's documenting it? So is it the anesthesiologist who's then going to be putting it into SA anesthesia, for example?
Yeah, so we're just, sorry, Paul.
Sorry,
ahead.
Sheila, go.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So we're currently being introduced to a second system where we're, a second system of safety where it's a closed system to administer cytotoxic drugs. For our operations in Richmond, the recovery room usually receives the patients who have already had those cytotoxic drugs commenced. So let's give an example of oxytocin that would have been commenced in the operating room or in the birthing center. The other one maybe that we would be using would be Dilantin. So we don't normally administer cytotoxic drugs like a cancer care clinic would do. So we more deal with patients who have received them already. We may continue an infusion, for instance, of oxytocin, but other than that, we really don't administer cytotoxic drugs here.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Draper, was there anything you wanted to add on that, or does that cover what your thoughts were?
No, that pretty well summarizes it. The only additional thought is that we have had some chronic pain physicians that have been administering IV infusions through the pain clinic, which is external to the operating room.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that covers, Sheila, what you're saying does cover what our questions were. Indeed, we recognize that you would start medication. So, after the baby's born, you'd start some oxy, you would get that going, and then it could go through recovery depending on the bleeding, etc. So we recognize that you would give those medications. I just didn't know if you had a specific workflow for other cancerous drugs that may start in a preoperative area, and then it depends. Maybe different start times, for example, if you had an established workflow for that.
Oh, no. They would be linked with the patient having surgery. So we wouldn't be scheduling specific. Yeah, right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to our next question. Do you ever do any direct patient care outside of the peri-op space, for example, in emergency, high acuity, or inpatient areas?
Yes.
Okay, and which areas are those?
Emerge, ED, ICU/HAU, wards.
Okay, yeah.
Like inpatient wards.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So all over the hospital, really, you can go.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Okay.
And we have a question about this ventilation orders, invasive ventilation order, which I'm going to bring up here.
Yeah, before you move on, just one
Yeah.
follow-up question from before.
Sure.
Are there any special procedures that you would do, blood patches, for example, anywhere outside of the PACU space? So we know that you'll do epidurals, PCAs, etc. on the labor and delivery unit, but are there any other procedures that we spoke about on your out of OR list? Do you perform them outside of the PACU space? Are there any other areas that we should know about that you're scheduled into?
Well, you're catching us at an unusual time in our group because we actually had two pain physicians, both of which are not currently working. One's retired and one's currently on leave. However, thinking to the future, there is the possibility that we would have one chronic pain physician who would be doing epidural steroid injections and or local anesthetic nerve blocks in a clinic located outside of the operating room area.
Okay, would that be operating like a full clinic? So clinic hours, patient would be coming in from home, or are these inpatients that would be going down to a specific space?
Some will be inpatients going down to, let's say, IR or to this freestanding, well, it's a clinic that's currently associated with the ambulatory care clinic at the hospital.
Okay.
And but the vast majority of patients would be coming in from home, but they are tend to be pre-booked through the booking system.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, we can move on to the invasive ventilation. If you want to go to the next slide there, Tommy, please.
Oops, sorry.
No worries. Ventilation order.
Right there.
Yeah. So this is the invasive ventilation order that we have in our system. And basically what we're doing is we are making, so these fields here, all of them are non-mandatory at the moment. And there's a ticket that's going through our ticket process to determine if we should make certain DTAs, so certain fields in here, mandatory. So request number one that you could see is the mode, the ventilation, vent rate, max P plateau, for example, and the rest of them listed would be mandatory fields. And the second request is to amalgamate some of them. So based on the first request, if these were made mandatory fields, would that impact your workflow? Would this be problematic to you if they were indeed made mandatory? And this could be from an RT perspective or anesthesia perspective, for example. What are your thoughts on that?
Rena, if you're still on, please, you can answer to that.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Rena. Yes, thank you.
Sorry. No, I don't. I think these are okay. These bars are okay because usually we have we chart through an RT worksheet.
Yes.
And so that's sort of shared between us and then the RTs that we pass on to. So I think this is okay.
Okay.
For that free text box, you're talking about have the pH, PS2 less than and greater than fields be merged into one where the provider can write out the range. So I don't understand that second part.
Yeah, so right now, when you have the pH, the PaC2, the PaO2, those fields, as you can see, they're all separate. But what VGH is finding is that they want to have them amalgamated into one big box. Look at the special instructions at the bottom. It looks something like that, where it will allow you as the RT, the AA, or the anesthesiologist, for example, to write in, and it would allow you to put in ranges, and it'll allow you to have, maybe you want to keep it within X to Z, for example, and you want to have it within a certain range, whereas here, it doesn't allow you to put in ranges. So VGH is thinking that they would like that better to have that, and we wanted to make sure that that can comply with your workflow as well.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It'd be nice to have that with the ranges. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that was our only questions around this, is we want to put something forward, but we also don't want to put something forward that would then hinder your workflow. So thank you for, we want to keep you in mind as we're making changes. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Tommy.
Okay, thank you. Let me just make sure. I went over that. Okay. All right, more questions for the AAs. In terms of the workflow for the AAs, are they pretty much the same as what we show you?
I missed the beginning part of the presentation.
I can send you the slide.
Yeah,
with the,
so
workflow.
right at the beginning, what we went through was more of scheduling the patient. So we scheduled the patient in, we showed how it would be for an elective surgery, for example. And then we showed what it would look like for an out of OR scheduling. And then we went through power chart. And I believe, I don't know if you jumped on when we got to power chart. And we are showing really from an anesthesiologist perspective, but it is the same navigation through for the AA.
Okay.
Some things that we wanted to point out that we did point out, and Tommy, if you could go back to the slide where we're showing the what type of notes in AA, sorry, just down, yeah, right there. So
Okay.
these ones here, and what they have is because the AAs have their work often signed off by an anesthesiologist, we do have one note that does not need to be signed off by an anesthesiologist, and I believe it was which note was it again?
With the narrative,
The narrative note.
Yes.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
navigating the system itself through a power chart will remain the same as you saw in the presentation here.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So based on all of that, were there any questions, concerns? We do have the various iView documentation components that would allow you to complete your workflow. For example, Cell Saver.
I saw that. Yeah. So that, yeah, that all
Yeah.
looks good to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Tommy, can you go back over to our questions that we have? Were there any other red flags that maybe we missed, that something that you perform that we didn't show in our documentation?
I can't think of anything. No.
Okay.
No.
Sure. So that's good. And then the
So
second question we have is,
there's a whole thing, a whole subcategory of non-invasive, right? Ventilation parameters.
Oh, yeah. Like if we were to BiPAP someone, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah. So
through the orders is what you're saying, or through documentation?
Well, both, I think. So just
Okay,
like you have an invasive ventilation order, I'm just asking, I assume that there is a non-invasive ventilation order too, but as our AAs would have to be able to access that protocol and order set as well.
Okay,
Yes,
there
we
is.
do have an order for
Yep.
NIPPV and also for CPAP in the power plans.
Yep.
yeah.
As long as the AAs have access to it, I assume, just as long as they have permission or whatever it is that's required.
Yes, thank you. I will double check with our RT team, but yes, I believe that is part of their workflow that they're using at VGH as well.
And things
go
like
ahead.
things like blood gases and stuff like that would all be included in their procedure list and access.
Yes, yeah. Blood gases, yeah. I'll write down the list of things that you added. And then for the do you have a functional cell saver?
Yes,
Your
we
OR?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay.
just have one. Yeah. And it's the same units that we use at VGH.
Okay. Are
Yeah.
you, as the anesthesia assistant, are you doing the documentation? Do you have someone else that
Yes.
might come in and do that documentation for you?
No, it's only the AAs that do the documentation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And the next question here is, do you perform any patient care procedures independent to an anesthesiologist? So for example, there's a workflow at VGH where an anesthesia is never assigned and it's always the AA who will run the procedure. Does something like that exist for you at your site?
I believe not, right, Dr. Draper? I'm pretty sure everything's would be under an anesthesiologist.
Yeah, I guess the only issue is the scenario where the patient's overnight and the vented overnight and ICU's been taking care of them. And so I don't know what that overlap in function would look like in the morning, but there's usually I don't know, Rena, you have to answer that sort of gray zone. Does the ward RT do it, or do you do it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so usually the ward RT will take over, or the float RT. So Francis only works till 7 p.m. So from 7 p.m. usually till the morning. When we come on at 6:30, well, when it's passed on to ICU, it'll be passed on to the RT at that point.
Okay, perfect. And then are you currently working in other positions and locations as an RT?
So for me, I'm still on the casual list here at Richmond as an
Okay.
RT. So
As an RT, okay.
yeah, and same with Francis as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And are you involved in any intra-op blood transfusions? And what does that look like for you in the OR?
Yeah, so we are involved with those. Required documentation. So it'd be the same as what the nurses have.
Okay,
Yeah. And
so
then
same thing for
yeah,
documenting volumes, etc. And then do you do any
Yeah.
free notes as well, or would that be on the
no,
nurse?
it's pretty much the same as what we do a shared. It's pretty much shared with the nurses in
Okay.
the room.
Thank you. Perfect. Do you have any other questions for me or that we should know about regarding your workflow that we did not touch on today, or the additional things that we've added?
No, I can't think of anything right now. I think I'd have to take
Okay.
another look at it.
Sure. Yeah. And you can always email us, but we'll go through
Okay.
more questions and maybe it'll stimulate something more for you.
Okay.
So we know that you don't perform any procedures without anesthesiologists. Do you do any referral triage? We know that you aren't involved with PAC at all, so I think that shouldn't be an issue for you.
Okay.
Are you involved with the PCA nerve block that the
No,
anesthesiologist may perform?
no, we're not.
Okay. And then
Well,
the
wait, but what about saphenous nerve blocks in the recovery room type of thing?
Oh yeah, so that we are. Yeah, not so much epidural or PCA, but nerve blocks, yes.
tell us about that and what that would look like. So anesthesia is present, anesthesia is performing the nerve block, and then you're
Yes,
there to assist.
we're assisting. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
What kind of documentation are you doing, or would it be on the anesthesiologist to do the documentation?
It would be on the anesthesiologist. We don't do any documentation.
Okay. What's the communication among, so if we were to book the out of OR procedure and you're performing a nerve block and we know that it's scheduled under Dr. Draper, what's the communication with you being involved? Does Dr. Draper call you? Are you assigned to one of them?
Yeah, so usually he'll either call us, yeah, or just let us know beforehand. But
Okay.
yeah, that's just our form of communication.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And it becomes first available AA, like it's not necessarily an assigned thing.
Yeah.
Yes, and that is what I was trying to get to. Is it an assigned item, or is this more of a communication piece and then you'll work together to find out who's an available resource?
Yeah.
Ad hoc.
Thank you. Perfect. And then do the anesthesia assistants go anywhere outside? So we know that anesthesia can basically go all over the hospital and perform procedures. Does AAs as well, or do you mostly stick to the OR PACU spaces or ICU?
Mostly to the OR and PACU spaces. Occasionally we've had to I've maybe had to go to emerge to maybe get a blood gas or do just sort of a initial assessment.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's it. Or, we'd have to assess someone maybe in ICU or anything with a difficult airway.
Okay.
So like either ICU emerge or yeah.
Yeah, so these departments would page you to get a hold of you?
Usually those are under the RTs, but then it's, if I have an attending anesthesiologist that asks me to just sort of assess someone before they can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that helps us. Thank you.
But nothing is really documented unless I'm actually doing a procedure like a blood gas. But that's really only procedure I can think of that I would be doing without the anesthesiologist.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. And then do the AA and RT duties ever done simultaneously?
Maybe. I'm just thinking maybe monitoring. Yeah, art lines probably.
Okay.
Yeah, art lines, blood gases, monitoring ventilation, whether it's not invasive or invasive, assisting intubations.
Yes.
That's what I can think of. Yeah.
Okay. Would you ever, if AA was unavailable, would the RT ever come into the OR?
Yes, and that's been done before.
Okay. And can you
Yeah.
tell us about that, what that would look like? Would the RT be expected to document, or would that be then just to provide
No.
a helping hand to Dr. Draper?
Just to provide a helping hand. And usually those cases are helping with a difficult airway or an awake
Okay.
intubation, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so there wouldn't be any duties on the RT to document, to do anything other if the anesthesia, it would be on the anesthesiologist to document what they were doing. They just need that extra
Yeah.
assistance.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And then final question that we have is, do you perform any BPMH or med recs at all?
No, I believe not.
Okay.
No, I don't. No.
No. Okay, thank you. This one here, Tommy, do you want to take us through this?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so we have a record here. Just wondering whether the PACU nurse use this record for ECT and for cardioversion.
Yes, we do.
Okay, and are there any other forms that are used for those procedures other than this form?
We have a flow sheet for both ECT and cardioversion that records arrival times of patient, psychiatrist, anesthesiologist, and time of cardioversion, time of ECT, and then discharge times. Is that what
Okay.
you would like to?
So,
Yeah.
so it's more to do with the case times.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Next page, and that is it from us. Thank you. Is there any question from you guys?
Okay, if any of the questions did stimulate further thought later on, please feel free to reach out to us. Tommy and Tammy are always available via email. You can certainly email us anytime, and we're happy to answer questions along the way.
So what's the next step for you guys and us? Like, how does this, where does it go? Like, we don't see you again, or the next time we ever interact in this fashion, is that a training session, or how does that work?
We're going to do another session like this. So we've gathered all the information that we have from you, and then we'll come together for another session. We'll call it our validation session, and we'll review all the pieces that we touched on today to make sure that the documentation and the workflow is according to what happens at your hospital. So we'll have this session on August 3rd. If you think of anything in between, please let us know. And then after that, we'll go into training sessions as we get closer to adoption at the go live time.
Has that August 3rd meeting already been sent out, that notification?
I don't believe so.
But I should pencil it in at this moment.
If you can, yes, Dr. Draper.
Before we wrap up, is there any other, I see that we have a lot of our other team members as well. I have an order set team member on the line with us, Solomon. I know that we have lots of our surgery design members. Do you have any questions for our SMEs today before we send them off and thank them for their time?
Nothing from me at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so feel free to reach out to us if anything does come up. We are happy to answer questions, review any of the content with you that you'd like to if something does come forward. We want to apologize again for the delay getting started today. I'm very sorry for the technical difficulties that we had, but thank you for your patience with us as we got started. The session was extremely helpful for us to go through everything. Is there anything in the chat that we may have missed? I see Mary, the questions were ECT. Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah, we're
thank
good.
you. Yeah, so we want to thank you again for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.